always felt comfortable betting on myself. That's really what it takes, man, to be successful in anything.
Mekka
You don't have
Don,
to act like all these
Nation.
things are different. All these things kind of make me me, and I should be proud of all of them.
Buckle up, buckle up. We going for a ride. Knuckle up, knuckle up. It's time for a fight.
We have a very, very, very special interview today. If you give me a moment to break down the accolades, we have the hip hop artist, actor, brand owner, TV commentator, public speaker, not to mention lawyer, Mr. Mekka Don. How you doing today?
What's up, bro? How you doing?
Good, good, really good. Just really excited. Um, you know, you being a former walk-on to everything that you're doing, everything that you're involved with today. Just super excited to break down your story and your journey.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it, man. I love what you guys are doing, and I do think that there is a a lot of untold stories of a lot of walk-ons and people who made it, in either in that sport or in different areas of life. So I love what you guys are doing, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll start with the beginning. We'll start from your childhood. So it's to my understanding that your parents came to Columbus, Ohio from Nigeria. Is that correct?
Yeah, my parents came here in the 70s to Ohio State, actually on academic scholarship. First time they ever touched down in United States soil was literally in Columbus, Ohio, to go to Ohio State. So that kind of set the tone for us.
So you've been in Ohio your whole life, and even though you eventually walked on for Ohio State for football, I read that football wasn't your first love.
Yeah, I started off as a soccer player. I started playing soccer when I was 4 years old. And, obviously coming from Nigeria, soccer is very big there. And so my parents had heavy influence on that. But that was my first love. And I played it, all through my junior year of high school. And then it wasn't until my senior year that I actually played football. And I was having some what they call Osgood slaughter. It's like
Mhm.
a disorder in my knee. So I was going really, really fast at that time. And I was a striker, so I couldn't really shoot anymore without inflammation.
Right.
But I could still run and cut, which is weird. So it's weird to like get hurt and then go play football.
Yeah.
Uh, but my gym teacher at school was our head football coach, and literally since the day I walked in there, my freshman year of high school, he was like, "Come play football, come play football." So finally, there was the opportunity, and I went and played, and our team was so good. We won the states that year. We won the states the year before that too,
Mhm.
when I was a junior, and because we had so many talented players on the team, we had scouts and different people coming to our games. Our whole offensive line went D1. Our quarterback went D1. Like it was nasty like that. So we had a lot of recruit people coming to scout, but they weren't looking for me. They were looking for these other guys. And then they would say, "Oh, who's that fast wide receiver out there?" And so I ended up getting looks as a result of them. And that's how it turned out.
So just growing up and playing soccer, what was your you were basically getting recruited at your school from freshman year. Like, how did you feel about football? Like, I know that's not a big sport in Nigeria. So like what was your thoughts when it was trying to get you for multiple years before you actually played?
I actually loved football. I grew up a huge football fan. Again, growing up in Ohio,
Right.
it's very hard to not be a football fan and obviously a Buckeye fan, but even beyond that, Browns and even just high school football is a big deal. My brother played football. He was older than me. He played football in high school. And so it was a big part of the culture.
Mhm.
It wasn't foreign to me. And then obviously playing football on recess and
Mhm. Mhm.
different games that we used to play. We can't even say those names now, what we used to call them, but like
Yeah.
uh, some of those tackle games and
Yeah.
stuff like that, it was something that I was always interested in, but it always conflicted with soccer season. It's the same season, so it was just
Mhm.
never really a thought that I could ever really legitimately do it.
Mhm.
Uh, but it was always something that I was interested in, and obviously growing up in Ohio, big football culture.
Okay. So when you finally made that transition, what was the because soccer, you get bumped, you fall, but you have no pads and things like that. Now you have pads, but the collisions are a little bit different.
Yeah.
How was that transition from soccer to football? What came naturally? What didn't come naturally? How was that?
So I think one of the biggest differences in the transition was conditioning.
Hmm.
So, because football and soccer, again, like I said, we're same season, we used to practice a lot of times at the same time as each other.
Hmm.
We would see kind of like the differences in conditioning. And so we had these things called scenics
Hmm.
that we used to have to run. And the scenic for the soccer team was like way longer than the scenic for the football team.
Yeah.
And because obviously you have to be in just a totally different type of shape if you're playing soccer and running back and forth for that long. So when I got to football conditioning, I don't want to say I was laughing, but it was just it was so easy in comparison
Yeah.
as far as the running part of it, right? But then like you said, but then you add on pads and you add on hitting, right? And that's a different level of energy. Um, so it was different, man. It was different in terms of just like, strategy and terminology and like positioning and just understanding, what you're supposed to do. And, in soccer, even if you're on offense, you still had some type of defensive responsibilities at times, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
And if you're, whereas in football, generally, unless you're Travis Hunter, you
Hmm.
know,
Right.
you're playing one side of the ball, and you have kind of one responsibility and so just learning all those type of things. And that was I think the biggest transition for me was that, I'm still learning the
Hmm.
game, so it's like even when I got to college, I'm still learning the game. I'm still learning like different coverages and, what certain routes are and stuff like that. It was so that was to me, I think the biggest transition was really just learning the game. The hitting part didn't bother me too much.
Okay.
Um, but it was, I was a receiver too, so it wasn't like I was taking the craziest amounts of contact,
Yeah.
but it was something that was definitely different than soccer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, but contact is contact. You either
Yeah,
cool with it or you're not cool
yeah,
with it.
right.
And
Yeah,
people usually find out at a young age.
very,
That's why
very.
they'll probably just switch to basketball or anything like that. Um, so you make this transition, and and like you said, you guys had a really good football team. There were colleges coming in to recruit others, but saw you in the process. Did you feel like it was possible that did you like it enough, love it enough to think about college? Like, what was that thought process like?
I was so interested in, just kind of the process, right? Because yeah, coaches come in, like not just the games and stuff like that, but literally coming to our school. And I
Mhm.
had like small school coaches coming during the day, pulling me out of class. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like, so then I started to think, well, wow, this might be a real opportunity to play the next level.
Mhm.
And again, it wasn't like my dream to be like in the NFL or anything like that. But I was like, this is cool. This is a pretty cool opportunity. So I was getting recruited by a lot of smaller schools, Ivy League schools, had an offer to play, I think at Brown
Mhm.
University. And then I ended up starting to, I was also very strong academically. So I started to get a lot of offers, scholarship offers,
Mhm.
academic scholarship offers from multiple schools, including Ohio State,
Mhm.
where I got full ride academic scholarship.
Mhm.
So then, as a result of that, that kind of opened up other opportunities. Like, okay, well, if I have a full ride academic scholarship somewhere,
Mhm.
then I might be able to walk on somewhere,
Yeah.
but I still didn't fully understand the process. You know what I mean? A lot of
Mhm.
them, my teammates, they've been being recruited for years, and they understood like how all this stuff worked. It wasn't. I never really had that experience. I mean, I got letters here and there from different schools for other sports and stuff, but not like that.
Mhm.
So, but as the season went on and I started kind of learning more about it and getting contacted by more and more people, it started to become a reality for me.
Rewinding just a little bit, your parents going to Ohio State, they eventually became professors, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so academic family, were really good in school as well. Like you were saying, you were getting these, academic scholarship offers even from Ohio State, but you live in Columbus, Ohio, and you think about Ohio State and it's football.
Yeah.
Academics is great, But if you're going to be involved with the Ohio State football team in any kind of capacity, you got to be like that.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
you got to be at least a super hard worker.
yeah.
So with your story in your case, you're just learning football.
Hmm.
You're still learning, you're still, receiver, things like that. Did you feel like that was like a big mountain to climb? Like what was your confidence going into that situation?
I was nervous because I think, you know, when you're younger, right, as an athlete, you have a whole bunch of confidence in whatever, like even if it's a new sport, you're like, man, give me
Hmm.
the ball. You know what I mean? I'll figure it
Yeah,
out, right?
yeah.
But as you get older, you start to realize that the stakes are a little higher, right? It is, especially when it comes to football, like
Hmm.
there's a lot of precision in each
Hmm.
play. Like if he says 8 yards, run 8 yards and out, that's not 9 yards. You know what I'm
Right,
saying? Like if you run nine
right,
yards, you didn't do it right. You know what I
right.
mean? So like those type of things, right? Understanding how to read coverages and if they do this, then you do that, and if they do this, then you do that. Like those type of things were made me nervous, right?
Hmm.
Not my natural athletic ability. I mean, obviously I had natural athletic ability, but those were the type of things that made me nervous. And so so I would try to study longer and study hard. I had a lot of catching up to do. I mean, there's some of even some of the terminology, Mike linebacker and things like that were like, I didn't understand them the way other people had understood them.
Right,
People who have been playing football for 10 years by that point in time.
right.
So there was a learning curve there that definitely made me nervous. And I knew that it's almost like learning a different language.
Hmm.
So it's like I knew there were going to be some bumps and bruises along the way for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So before you get into Ohio State, you transition from soccer. I read that, you just had other interests and other things going along. I mean, obviously you had academics, but you had other things going. So how did you navigate all of these interests at the same time as you're, taking this big step, which for most people takes 100% of their focus? Like, how did you navigate all of your interests?
I think one of the things that I'd always been good at was time management. And I
Hmm.
think um one of the things and I think sports helped me with that. I always tell people that like, like if I had practiced from, I don't know, let's say 6 to 8 or whatever, you
Hmm.
know, then I knew that if I wanted to study or whatever other thing that I needed to do, I had to do it before 6 or
Hmm.
after 8. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it was like, so then I would kind of like just schedule my life, or at least try to, according to, what the fixed things were that I had, like school, you had to be in school until 3 or whatever,
Hmm.
practice 6 to 8. And then these are the periods of time that, you have free. And that's the same thing that helped me when I got to college.
Hmm.
So that's kind of how I did it. And I always, I always thought outside the box, man. I never thought that I should be confined to just doing this one thing that everybody wants me to do, or this one thing that everyone says, like, okay, you can only do this, you can't do that.
Hmm.
I never liked that,
Hmm.
conceptually, and maybe because I'm the youngest of 4 kids, and I got to see a lot of different things. I got to kind of, had a little bit more freedom of
Yeah.
thought in terms of picking and choosing kind of how I wanted my life to be. But I was very keen on making sure that I made time for the things that I liked.
Hmm.
So then for me, it just really became a time management thing. And that's what I
Right.
kind of tell a lot of people too. It's like, all right, this is when I have the time to do this. And so this is when I'm going to do this. Right. And so that's really how I balanced it, is really just by understanding, first of all, being honest with myself about, you know, was this something I was truly interested in, or was it just something for fun? You
Hmm.
know, what was the prospects of what I was doing? And then I would just like, kind of delegate my time based on that. And so that's kind of how it was back then, and that's kind of still how it is now.
So let's talk about these exact interests, before you walk on the campus. What was everything that, you were interested in, wanted to get into besides what your intended major was and football?
Yeah. So music was always was the biggest one.
Hmm.
It still is. I grew up in a family that, loved music. Everybody, my family loved music. My parents played music all the time in the house, and my siblings, I'm the youngest of four. My siblings were playing music. My brother's the one that introduced me to a lot of hip hop and stuff like that. And so
Hmm.
that was always a big interest of mine. We would actually write songs as siblings, and
Hmm.
they weren't good, but we would
Yeah.
we would write them, and we would dress up as different artists and crisscross and do all of the
Okay.
stuff. You know what I mean? So we were like really about that.
Yeah.
Um, and then in high school, my brother and I formed a band where I was a drummer actually in the band, and he was the guitar player, and so we played all different types of music. And but hip hop was really the one that really stuck with me more than anything else. So even
Hmm.
as a drummer, I would still get out in front sometimes and rap, or at least try to.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that was like the big one. Then I was also interested in acting and kind of like the acting modeling space.
Hmm.
Um, and it wasn't necessarily something that I knew how far it would go, but I knew that, I had some level of talent in it. I was doing like local commercials and stuff like that
Hmm.
uh, here in Ohio. And so this is, before I got to New York. So all of those interests, like the entertainment bug, I think was really, in me early on.
Hmm.
I breakdancing for people when I was 4 years old. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's my story. So, I think that one of the reasons why I wanted to go to New York um, after I graduated from Ohio State was because I wanted to tap into that side of entertainment. And so but even going to Ohio State, those are things that were very important to me. I knew I
Mhm.
wasn't gonna have a ton of time to kind of pursue them all, but I always tried to at least make time for some of those things while I was in college.
Absolutely. So you're, you're basically trying out so many things and interested in so many things. And most people they choose one or two things, but in your case is like four or five. Like, and there's rarely, even today and really throughout history, there's rarely people that are good at multiple things, but you were that, and you were that from a young age. Was there anybody that you like looked up to that, crossed over in certain areas that really inspired you as you were like navigating your own interests?
Yeah, I think I was inspired by a lot of people, but Tupac was a big inspiration for me. Um, Particularly because I felt like he was someone that like embraced all aspects of himself.
Yeah.
So even on music, you could hear a song about some positive upliftment stuff, and the very next song it could be I Get Around. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it
Yeah.
was like, but all of these are him. All of
Hmm.
those things are him. They're not personas necessarily. It's like, yeah, sometimes I just want to kick it and I want to have fun and I want to wild out.
Hmm.
And other times I want to talk about some of the real issues that are going on in society.
Hmm.
I think that was a big inspiration for me from a hip hop perspective. And then he started branching out into other things. Like, I mean, obviously he was a poet, but
Hmm.
got into acting and he was a really good actor.
Right.
Tupac was a very, very good actor. In fact,
Hmm.
he was probably an actor first before he was even a rapper, in Baltimore School of Arts or whatever school he went to. And um, so that was also dope for me too, just watching somebody in real time, a star in real time,
Hmm.
kind of embrace different parts of themselves,
Hmm.
and then society kind of accepting it. And then you start to see other artists that were doing similar stuff, like DMX and some of the other artists that were starting to do
Hmm.
that as well. LL Cool J back then, even Ludacris started to, people starting to, embrace other aspects. And I said, wait, that's dope. And then Jamie Foxx for sure. Like he's
Yes.
someone that, as I've continued to like
Hmm.
get older, I continue to just be like, yo, that's my lane. You know what I mean? I can host. He was a football, he was an athlete, he's an actor, he's a
Hmm.
musician, he embraces all of himself. So those are some of the people I looked up to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Jamie Foxx because when I think of a multi-talented, just entertainer,
Yeah.
he can play the piano, like he could do stand up. He's been in great movies. Just all around talent, and that's a God gift in my opinion. You just born with it, and not everybody has it. So being able to utilize it like he is, like you are, is Very, very special.
But here's the other thing too, real quick on that, is that he's also was able, for life circumstances allowed him to tap into a lot of those things. I think a lot of us are multi-talented
Mhm.
and probably talented in a lot of more things than we even know. And if we had the ability or the time or the resources to kind of develop and foster some of those things, we would probably see different versions of ourselves. But society is so gung ho on people being like this one thing and specialization, and I understand that in certain areas. But a lot of us just don't get the opportunity a lot of times to really explore some of our other talents.
Right.
And when you go in Hollywood right now, for example, someone that is a great actor, for example,
Mhm.
and you go and dig behind it, I bet you they're good at dancing, they're good at singing, they're
Mhm.
good at writing, they're good at
Yeah,
a lot of other things. But the thing that they had to focus on, because that's what life took them to, was that one thing. And so that's the other thing I'll say is I think that yes, a lot of these things are God given, and but there's also another side of it, which is being given the opportunity to actually develop, explore, and foster those things is also a gift as well.
for sure, for sure. So let's dive into that just a little bit more. What do you think that the average person who only thinks that they have one talent, but may have some other interests, what do you think that they can do to explore these interests or utilize it, open it up, and be considered, get to the point where they're considered multi-talented?
I think one of the things is first of all just acknowledging what those things are, right?
Mhm.
And starting with the interests, like what are the actual interests? If you ask somebody, write down five interests. What are your five things that you care about? Five things that get you excited, and start there, right? And then I think instead of talking yourself out of it, talk yourself into it.
Mhm.
And everything doesn't have to necessarily be like, on the most highest professional level of all time. But if you're interested in cooking, for example, or painting, or I'm just throwing things out there. You don't have to necessarily be, Michelangelo to say like
Right,
I'm gonna paint.
right.
But you should make space for that. If that's something that you're interested in and that you have talent, you should make space for that. If
Mhm.
there's like, art classes that you can take, you can take some of this stuff online. You know what I mean? Make space for that. Make an hour of space or 2 hours of space for that every week to take an art class instead of going to, you know, I don't know, the bar or whatever or ever anything else. Make space for it. And I think that's part of what we have to do. We have to take back control of our lives to a certain degree, right? Which is
Mhm.
stop talking ourselves out of things and telling ourselves why we can't do things and we don't have the time and all that other stuff, and talk ourselves into things, right?
Mhm.
And then also I think, just part of this is also related to happiness.
Mhm.
It's almost like, what do we need to do to find happiness? And some of the things that we need to do to find happiness is to actually make space and time for the things that we enjoy. And so, most people don't necessarily love their job or their daytime thing that they're doing, and they'll complain,
Mhm.
and I understand.
Mhm.
But there's also other hours of your day and other parts of your life that you know don't have to be that, right?
Mhm.
It could be spent with things that you enjoy, and I've seen this happen many times too. You start to make space for some of these things, and sometimes those things eventually become your main thing, because
Yeah.
now it's like you really built the skills, you really built the network maybe, and then somebody sees you, or opportunity, you're in that space, so you're now hearing
Mhm.
about opportunities that you weren't hearing about before. Next thing you know, you have an opportunity to go be the art director at such and such place that you would have never even thought about before. So you got to make space for yourself and your talent, but you also have to make space for the world to see it and accept it.
Absolutely. Those are some gems right there. Those definitely some gems that you dropped, man. Okay, so going to, Ohio State, more focusing on the time that you had with the football team, being with the cream of the crop, the best of the best. How would you describe your time as a walk-on with Ohio State?
My time as a walking on Ohio State was really interesting, man. I had a great time. First of all,
Mhm.
was an amazing experience. When I look back on it, every time I look back on just that time period, I always smile. And part of
Mhm.
it is because I remember, and I think a lot of former athletes, when you talk about like what they remember, a lot of times it's not even, you might remember some things in the games and stuff like that. But a
Hmm.
lot of times it's like the camaraderie, it's the locker room stuff, it's the jokes, it's the, little things that happen. And you remember such and such did this and whatever, and those type of things. And so I look back on it very fondly. I think one of the things that I also think is like I didn't realize I didn't how much I did not know, right? And so I
Hmm.
was naive a lot about how football, not just Ohio State, but just football, the business industry, the industry of college football, how it actually works, all the different things that go into running a program, all the ancillary things. I was telling somebody yesterday, like we have 100,000 people that come to every game at Ohio State, but outside the stadium, there are about 400 to 500,000 people tailgating,
Right.
and we never got to experience tailgating. That wasn't part of our day to day. It
Yeah.
wasn't until after you start playing, then you start like being like, oh wow, and then you start to realize the whole ecosystem around this, right? And how it works. I think practice was hard, and I was, that's being a walk on, and you're pretty much last, for everything.
Hmm.
It was hard, and there was also it wasn't just that I was playing and being and last on the totem pole, but it's also I'm still learning the game. Like I literally only played one season in high school,
Right.
and then
This is year
I'm at
two.
yeah
Yeah.
year two, and I'm at the Ohio State University. It's
Right.
not like I was like at something like community college, that was grooming me for that. That's
Right.
like right in.
Right.
There's no time. There's no time. Nobody's sitting there like, all right, Mac, here, let's go sit down for 2 hours and I'm gonna walk you through everything. It's like, nah, they don't.
Mhm.
You'll have your team meetings and stuff like that and position meetings, but that's so you got to learn a lot of this stuff on your own,
Right.
and some of the stuff, like some of the terminology they're using in meetings, I don't even know what you're talking about. Some of the coverages you're talking about, I don't
Right.
know what you're talking about. I literally don't know it.
Yeah.
So, so there was a lot of that. But I think that the thing that made my experience really, really dope was that, we had good coaches and the players, they never treated me crazy. You know what I mean? They never
Mhm. Yeah.
treated me like, oh man, move over a little walk on dude. Like they didn't treat me like that. They
Mhm.
were always cool. And a lot of like the older dudes, like, even I'm still cool with them to this day. You know what I mean? That
Mhm.
always just showed love. And I always wonder, like, did you do that? Because you didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And so those are the times. I mean, I never played. I never got on the field.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, as much my experience was mostly practice and scout team and spring
Hmm.
game, stuff like that. And I never expected to. But the good news is that for me was that it wasn't. Yeah, it would have been nice, but that wasn't to me. I knew what my place was. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
knew what my purpose was. I knew, that my purpose was really to help make other people better. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Practice
Hmm.
and push other people. And um, I knew I wasn't going to the league. That wasn't something that I really thought was possible.
Hmm.
So I had good perspective about it, and I think that made it a lot better as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the at the end of the day, like you're saying, it's the locker room.
Yeah.
I always tell people all the time, the funniest, just most diverse personalities you
Yeah.
will find in the locker room. Like there's no rules on conversations.
Yeah.
There's not really a hierarchy really like that. It's just whoever
Yeah.
you are, and these people are from around the country, around the world.
Yes. Yes.
So you're going to get a mix of stuff, and there's going to be stories all the time, and things like that. So it is a beautiful
And you
time.
just take all those guys and you just throw them into one place and like
Right.
y'all figure it out. And we figure
Right.
it out.
Right.
So it's a dope thing. Yeah.
Right. So you only played football for a year and a half, correct?
Hmm.
So what was that transition like when you said like, okay, I'm done. Like you weren't playing it for a long time, so it didn't go way back to where you were like 5 years old or way
Yeah.
back to maybe you would say in your soccer, playing career.
Yeah.
But was that like a tough decision? How did you feel with all the other things that you were interested in to walk away from football?
It was a tough decision because I think that and this is just me being honest, I think that, my experience on the team was immediate. We started camp August 4th,
Hmm.
my freshman year, and our classes didn't start until September 17th.
Hmm.
We were already a month and a half in.
Hmm.
Those are the guys I knew 100 guys before I even started, campus even or school even
Hmm.
started. And but you walk into school as a football player,
Yeah.
right? So literally, like everybody knows by the time campus school even starts, everybody knows like who's on the football team. You know
Right.
what I mean? And at a school like that, like there's a certain clout and cachet and whatever that comes with being on the football team.
Yeah.
So, and that's just becomes part of who you are, even if you're not like trying to flaunt it or wear your jacket everywhere, or whatever. Like people, it becomes part of who you are. So I think that one of the hard parts about leaving was that I was also kind of leaving that identity behind while I
Mm-hmm.
was still on campus. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people will leave, they'll graduate, they've played all the way through. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have to deal with the non being a not a football player until they move to the next phase of their life.
Right. Right.
But leaving that while I'm still on campus, it was kind of like, all right, so now I'm about to be regular, and not regular, but you understand
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I'm not to be, just Mecca. I'm not, on campus. Um, so that was part, that was hard. I think, um, but I was so focused on what I wanted to do next, which was I wanted to go to law school and I wanted to get to New York to kind of pursue
Mm-hmm.
my entertainment goals.
Mm-hmm.
And I also graduated from college in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I was taking mad credits like
Right.
every semester. And so to be able to do that and do it successfully,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, man, something's gonna have to give,
Yeah.
trying to do 20 credit hours and then go to practice and actually practice well. And then you have to watch film and do all the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like it didn't feel like it was gonna make sense for me anymore. And so that was a hard thing. It was hard. And it wasn't really necessarily, like you said, because I felt like I was giving up on like a necessarily an NFL dream.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also me kind of recognizing that this is the end of kind of my organized sports
Mm-hmm.
career. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like since I was young, I'd been in organized sports and I always had teammates and travel and the camaraderie we talk about and
Mm-hmm.
locker room moments and sharing in the success and the failures with your teammates. And then now it's like you're kind of on your own again. I've
Yeah.
always been a part of a team. I played 4 sports in high school. I played basketball my first 2 years. I ran track, obviously soccer and football. So, and
Mm-hmm.
then dating back to grade school, same thing. So that was a hard recognition. Like, wow, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is like potentially the end of your athletic career in any real way.
Mm-hmm.
So that was rough, but that was something that was something that was rough to deal with.
Football takes up so much time,
Mhm.
and what you were doing in school takes up so much time. And I'm not even going to ask about your social life while you're trying to graduate in 3 years and be a student athlete.
Right.
So we won't go into that too much. But now you have a little bit more time to focus, maybe some other interests that you're looking into, maybe diving into music a little bit more. You mentioned your goal was to go to law school. Did that make it easier? Were you able just to relax a little bit, or were you just, I'm still going, still full
So I
go?
think a couple of things. I think one is like, there's a lot more free time,
Yeah,
right? I was like, dang, I got all this time now. Like, you know what I'm
yeah,
saying? And not just free time, but also free thought. Like you didn't have anything, something else controlling you, right?
mhm,
And I mean that like in the literal sense, like what time you go to sleep, what time you wake up, what you eat, where you are, you know what I mean? All those different types of things. You didn't have that like big thing that was like cloud controlling you.
mhm,
That was almost like taking back my life,
mhm,
in some ways. And then now it's time for me to get in control though, right? So that's a dangerous time period because sometimes that structure is what we need that helps keep us in line. And now you have to create the structure for yourself.
mhm.
Me though, it was amazing because it did allow me to start planning and executing on some of the other things, the music in particular.
Yeah.
Start writing more, doing more stuff with the band. Like I said, I was a drummer, so practicing the drums, working on different, other aspects of my entertainment career, public speaking. I wanted to write a book. I ended up writing a book the year after I graduated, like a self-published fiction novel, and so all those different types of things that um, I had so much more time for to explore.
Mhm.
And going back to what we talked about earlier, having the time to kind of explore
Yeah.
those things. So that freed up a lot of time for me. So it was still go mode, but it was much more on me now, right? To make
Mhm.
sure there was no entity that was like, all right, Mac, here's how it's gonna go. You
Right.
know what I mean? Like I had to really figure that out on my own.
Was it tough to, because you had to be disciplined already, but now that you take a large portion off your schedule, was it tough to develop discipline or was the discipline aspect always right there?
It was the discipline. Well, the structure and the foundation of my discipline was always there, which was
Okay.
good. I mean, I was like that since I was young. My dad always tells me, he's like, "You're the one kid that I never had to wake up in the morning." You know what I mean? So I'd always been driven that way.
Hmm.
And but that doesn't mean when I say that though, I think sometimes people just think, okay, it's just easy for you. Just
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
still hard, right?
Yeah.
But it's just like there's kind of an internal, I don't know, engine that is just that can't be stopped. You know what I mean? So if and even now I'm like that to this day. If I feel like Meg, you kind of BSing this week, man. Like
Yeah.
something will be like, all right, let's go. Let's
Hmm.
And so I think that had always been there. And also, I was very motivated. The other thing is, I still had real goals ahead of me that were tied to being disciplined, including
Hmm.
law. I still needed to finish out with a great grade point average.
Right.
I ended up graduating with a 3.7, I think. I ended up, I still had to take the LSAT, right, and get
Hmm.
into law school. I
Yeah.
had to get into a school in New York because that's where I wanted to go. If I didn't get into, and there were only, I wanted to go to one of the top schools. I wanted to go to either NYU or Columbia.
Hmm.
I'm going to NYU. You know what I mean? Like, so those are the things that like were still very real in front of me. So it wasn't like I didn't have real, actual, tangible goals left.
Hmm.
So the focus kind of just shifted. Like, all right, this is what you got to do.
Hmm.
But it was still hard though, and
Hmm.
because I still like to wanted to balance other things. I still had a very dope social life. I threw parties in college. Like I was lit in college. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
wasn't just like studying all the time.
Hmm.
I would have had to balance those things.
Hmm.
But yeah, the discipline, I think some of the discipline that had been instilled in me since I was young and some of the ways I had operated in terms of prioritizing things and managing time, I think kind of
Hmm.
stuff.
Could you speak more on that of when everybody's career ends at some point.
Mhm.
Um, and it is tough for a lot of athletes to transition because they haven't really watered their
Yeah.
next, adventure, interests, things like that. And you mentioned earlier that it is, you got to make time for these things and you have to make an effort for these things, and these things don't come naturally. How much easier would you say your transition was from just the football life, the student athlete life to, getting into law school and just mastering that life
Yeah.
because you had so many interests that you actually watered from a young age?
Yeah. I think it was rough because I think, like as we said, like kind of coming to grips with the fact that my kind of athletic career was over,
Hmm.
I think was tough. I think but as it related to football specifically, because I never, I didn't grow up with the goal of like, man, I got to be in the NFL.
Hmm.
The easier transition mentally for me than
Hmm.
it was for some of my teammates,
Yeah.
and some guys I'm still friends with that are still dealing with those
Hmm.
kind of transition issues. Because I didn't know, I always knew myself to be multiple things. So that was the thing that
Hmm.
was such a blessing for me. And I remember some of my former teammates used to tell me, like, bro, even one of my dudes that went to the league got
Hmm.
drafted, everything. He was like, bro, I would rather be you than me. And I was like,
Wow.
why? This is when he's in the league. I'm like, bro,
Wow.
why? I'm a
Yeah.
football student. Like, what does that mean? He's like,
Yeah.
listen, you have a future that is not necessarily tied to this.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is for me. I said, listen, you have a future too that's not tied to this. He said, yeah, 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 but this is pretty much who I've been my whole life. So I'm
Right.
gonna have to figure out what that is. You already have other interests and other things that you've already done. And so I hadn't looked at it like that. I didn't really understand that um, as well until he had said that. And then it kind of put things in perspective for me that I actually was pretty fortunate, right, to have watered some of these other things, had another path, had other goals. Because as athletes, one of the things that drives us is goals.
Right.
Winning and accomplishing and
Hmm.
getting a trophy and
Hmm.
finishing, whatever that means, right? And so me having goals, particularly like law school, just as an example, um, that was a challenge. And as an
Hmm.
athlete, that's what we want. We want to be challenged. And so
Hmm.
going into something where there's a challenge and there's a finish and there's a goal
Mhm.
right away, right? That also was something that was very promising and fulfilling and
Mhm.
prestigious, right? And you got love for it, right? You
Mhm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that also mattered too, because part of this is, I think, that people don't understand is that part of what we're missing is the love that we get from
Yeah.
society, from people. Even our friends and family treat some of us different when we're on a team versus when we're former.
Right.
I told somebody, I said, listen, man, there's a difference between being the seventh string punter on an NFL
Yeah.
versus being a former player for one day. You just retired.
Yeah.
The way people talk about you is so different.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even notice it. Sometimes it's subconscious.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen in real time to a lot of my guys who played in the league and some who didn't, but some of my guys who played in the league, played successfully in the league, had
Mhm.
great careers. And literally the day they retired, they were a totally different person to society.
Right.
So I also started to see some of those things happening, uh,
Mhm.
and also wanted to make sure that I was like not falling into that trap, the emotional kind of trap of of needing that love, right? Of
Right.
needing that kind of recognition of having that be so tied to my identity that
Mhm.
I don't know who I am without it. And so
Mhm.
so I was very blessed in that way, you know, and so one of my things, you know, and I know you didn't really ask me this, but one of my things I do talk to a lot of athletes about is like the young guys, especially, is like, you know, go all in, do your thing for sure,
Yeah.
be the best you can be, but don't let this thing be your whole entire identity
Right.
because one day, I don't care, even if you're play till you're 45,
Mhm.
you're still going to be a young man and have half of your life left.
Mhm.
So you're going to have to figure out who you are at some point outside of this.
Right.
And I think that's worked really, really well for me and made my transition a lot easier than a lot of people's.
As major as a lot of that's a it's talked about a little bit, but it's not talked about enough of how tough the transition is, whatever sport you're in, whether you had broke records or didn't even play, that's still what you did from such a young age, and that's needs to be talked about more for sure.
For sure does. For sure.
So so you graduate Ohio State in 3 years, you go to law school, and and I don't want to skip past the fact that D1 football player, interest in music. Now you want to go to law school and NYU, very prestigious, which it's super difficult what you've done, what you're doing, and but you pass the bar, and it's you pass the bar, and I mean, this is careers of different. You have the career of five people, really.
Yeah.
And but I read that you said that there's an interview that's associated with the bar, correct?
Yeah. Yep. A character, a fitness interview. Yeah.
Yeah, so you said that a large majority of that interview was you talking about your time with Ohio State football.
Yeah.
Could you give me some insight on
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
were saying, what that was like?
So yeah, so when you take the bar, that basically you have to pass the actual written exam,
Hmm.
and then to become a lawyer, but you also have to pass something called a character and fitness test, which is they essentially have character and fitness like consultants or a committee. I don't know exactly how they get chosen, and you have to go through an interview process, a live interview process, where
Hmm.
they ask you a number of different things about who you are essentially. So they'll ask you about traffic tickets, they'll ask you about anything to see whether or not they think you are fit
Yeah.
to be an attorney in this state. Do you represent the kind of the highest level of ethics and standards? And so, you know, everybody's nervous. You're waiting in line to go into that meeting, and everybody's nervous. And so I get in the line, and I swear about the guy asked me a few questions, and the next thing he starts asking me about Ohio State football. He saw that on my resume, of course.
Mhm.
And the meeting just turned into just a discussion about Ohio State football, asking me about my time there and
Mhm.
position I played and who are some of the players that I played with and any special moments and stuff like that. I can't remember exactly all the details, but I remember about 90% of that interview was just about me playing at Ohio State. And it was interesting because this is in New York. And so it was one of those moments that gave me um that made me realize the power of that on my resume.
Yeah.
Beyond just Columbus, Ohio, and Ohio State fans and stuff like that, right? That some random kind of committee member in New York bar
Yeah.
was knew enough about it and recognized it enough to have it be something that we talked about on my character and fitness interview, you know. So
Right.
that was pretty crazy. I never forget that. But it was it was a reminder of like, wow, man, you know, because as I keep going, and and this is kind of slightly off the subject, but still on the subject a little bit, is as I keep going in life, you know, I just keep going, right? And so for
Mhm.
other people looking in, they're kind of like, Mac, you're doing all this and you did that and you did that. And sometimes people say stuff to me and I'd be like, I forgot I did that. Like I don't even not even like on some not arrogantly at all, just like I've moved on to the next
Yeah.
thing. Sometimes
Mhm.
I forget to even mention that I wrote a book. People are like, how do you forget to mention that? Like
Yeah.
how? I'd be
Yeah.
like, I just that was 20 years ago. Like I don't, I've done so many different things since then. But um but I think that it was important. That period of time was important because it made me slow down and realize, like, okay, Mac, like you don't have to act like all of these things are different. These are all you, right?
Mhm.
And they're
Mhm.
all related. They're all interesting, and they're all
Mhm.
part of what make you you. So you don't have to now feel like, oh, okay, that football that was that period of time, and now I'm this lawyer. That's this period of time, and now I do music. Like, nah,
Mhm.
all these things kind of make me me, and I should be proud of all of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, you're doing a lot, and these are all big things. These are not no side hustle things. So, I mean, passing the bar, not everybody can pass the bar. Not everybody's able to do that. So, that's another, feather on your cap for sure. So you pass the bar, you start working for a law firm, and then you decide that, hey, I want to make another transition, big transition, because once people pass the bar, because it's so difficult to pass the bar, that they stick with that for the
Forever.
rest of their careers, basically. But you
Yeah.
say, nah, I'm gonna make this transition. So again, just like you transitioning out of Ohio State football, what was that like to transition out of just law?
I think it was crazy because at the time, a lot of people for a lot again, this is how it's different from a lot of people I went to school with. And
Mhm.
that was like the American dream right there. You
Yeah,
pass the New York bar, you're a New York lawyer, you're working at one of the top 10 law firms in the world.
yeah.
You are on your way. That's this it. You're set. This is the path. You
Mhm.
keep working here, then in 8, 10 years, you become a partner and
Yeah.
you're making millions of dollars a year and,
Mhm.
and you ride off into the sunset, right?
Mhm.
That was a lot of people's dreams. For me, that was not my dream.
Yeah.
And I also knew that before I went. So it wasn't like I went there, was like, I hate this. Let me get out of it. It's like I knew that I was only gonna stay in that type of setting,
Mhm.
corporate America setting, for so long. But I
Mhm.
did want to make sure that I went. First of all, my story is one of someone who graduated and passed the bar and worked. It's
Mhm.
a totally different story than someone who dropped out and didn't finish. And not to say that that person can be successful too, but
Mhm.
it's just two totally different type of stories. And my story, I wanted my story to be the former.
Mhm.
So because when you're talking about kind of understanding how life can go, I thought that it was always going to be valuable for me to be an attorney, for me to have that degree from NYU, for me to be a New York barred attorney that practiced in New York. That was always going to be a relevant part to my story. I realized that at that time.
Mhm.
Not to mention the knowledge, the relationships, the experience, the expertise that you gain as a result, and how that can help me in multiple different ways in business and entertainment and a lot of other things that I knew I would eventually do.
Mhm.
Um, so leaving the firm wasn't like devastating for me because I had other goals that I wanted to go pursue.
Yeah.
And I also realized, I think I was 24 when I graduated from law school.
Wow.
And I remember thinking like, I'm still young.
Mhm.
No, I don't want to stay here and get used to this salary. They call them the golden handcuffs, Yankees tickets, and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Like if I stay here and do that, I'm gonna get caught up in this life.
Yeah.
I got to get out of here. And so I saved a lot of money. And my parents did not fund anything that I've done. So if people think that I come from this, like, no, my parents were middle class. They were like, oh, great when I made it. And then all of a sudden you want to leave. They're like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
so my mom always kind of thought, I'm her baby. So she always thought, okay, you're going to go be a star or whatever. My dad, though, was much more conservative. And so for him, this is you've made it. Now you're going to leave something certain to go do something uncertain. And my uncertain move was I was going to go out and try to pursue my career as an entertainer, as a rapper, as an artist, as an actor, and everything. I
Hmm.
didn't have a record deal. I wasn't signed to any. I didn't have an agent. I wasn't signed to anything.
Hmm.
But I had made so many connections in New York. I was throwing parties and stuff too, and
Hmm.
I'd already started modeling and acting and made connections in the music industry. Um, so I just bet on myself,
Hmm.
and I said like, I'm gonna figure it out one way or another. I'm gonna figure this thing out, and I knew I needed to have money to do so that's why I saved a lot of money. And I was like, but if I don't put my back against the wall, like if I don't force my back to be against the wall,
Hmm.
it's not going to be against the wall. You can only do this at nighttime or on the weekends
Yeah.
so often. You know what I mean? Like that's not gonna lead you to ultimate success. You'll have some wins here and there, but like it's not just about, especially when you're in an industry where you need fans, right? You need support. You need people that believe. People need to believe in you. And I tell people this, a lot of young artists, like fans, I call them like they're like emotional investors, right? They're investing their emotions into artists. And one of the things that they want to know is like, are you real? Do you care
Hmm.
about this? How much do you care about this?
Yeah.
Are you going to be here next year? Or are
Yeah.
you just doing this and just playing around and then you're going to go back to do your other thing, right? So I was like, so those are all the things that were like going through my head as I was making the decision. Um, but it was also not lost on me that I knew that when I made that decision and I went and told the law firm that I'm out,
Hmm.
that could blackball me
Yeah.
some way from that industry indefinitely,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and so I knew that at the time, right? It wasn't like I was like naive to that. I knew that at the time, but I knew also that I was like, I'm never going back.
Yeah.
I'm never going back.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that I won't have to hustle or do something in corporate America again or figure something else out, but I'm not going back to this, and I'm going to do what it takes to make it work.
You brought up back against the wall, and that is a tough decision. Like you do it often and you thrive in uncomfortable moments and situations. You have a comfort zone with uncomfortable. But for most people, they don't take that one risk. What can you like tell people to, whatever they're interested in that sounds scary, and you have a very comfortable job. You have a high paying job that is comfortable. You won't have no issues, but like, no, you choose again and again and again to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
What can you tell people at least about the feeling, about the discovery of choosing the road less traveled and uncomfortable?
So I think the thing that I realized that I think changed my life forever is that every single thing that you do is a risk.
Hmm.
Some of the things that you think are quote unquote comfortable or safe are actually not
Hmm.
comfortable, including working at one of these corporations. And I'm not saying that people should quit and all that type of stuff. My point is, I've seen so many people who were worked at a company for X amount of years and bam, one day laid off. No warning. They
Yeah.
go type their stuff in the next day. They're locked out. Done. Layoffs are happening all the time. Companies are closing all the time. Companies are emerging or getting acquired
Hmm.
consistently. You're constantly being critiqued for your performance,
Hmm.
happiness level,
Yeah.
right? Which is a lot of times, yeah, you might be making money or have a paycheck, but you're miserable, right? There are a
Hmm.
lot of other things that I feel like you have to take into account. And so, and I feel like I recognized that at a younger age than most people did. And I think part of it, again, I attribute a lot of these type of things to me being the youngest of my family
Hmm.
and being able to observe and just being an observant person generally. Um, and that really made me like understanding that all of these things are a risk. It's just which type of risk are you going to take?
Right.
Um, I think really changed my life. And then it's like, okay, now you're making bets. So if everything's a risk, then now everything's a gamble. So if everything's a gamble, that means you're making bets. Who are you betting on? Are you
Hmm.
betting on them? Or are you betting on yourself?
Hmm.
And for me, so this takes a certain level of confidence, clearly.
Hmm.
But I always felt comfortable betting on myself, you
Hmm.
know. And part of it is not necessarily because I just think I'm some superhero, but I just believe that I will do what it takes to kind of figure it out.
Mhm.
Whereas you can also bet on somebody else and their interests in your life, and most of the time they don't have your best, interests at heart.
Right.
You're only as good at, to them as you're useful at that point, right? And then once you're not, and that's not something that you can control.
Right.
So to me, that's too risky for me, right?
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean you can't have partnerships and you can't develop, work with other people. It doesn't mean that, but I just felt like that was always very risky. So um I also realized though that there's a business side to this thing, and to when you bet on yourself, and you do have to actually figure it out. You don't have a paycheck that comes in necessarily consistently, and you don't have somebody telling you, okay, here's what you need to do and this is what you need to do. You got to figure out a lot of things on your own. Um but I also realized that if I dedicate the amount of hours that I would dedicate, to anything else, to kind of figuring this thing out, I just believe that I believe that I'll figure out a way. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that's kind of
Mhm.
what always drove me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just in terms of, betting on yourself versus people, it's just like in general, nobody cares about you the way you care about you. You
Period. And
know,
nobody understands you the way you understand yourself.
right.
At the end of the day, you have to be honest with yourself. Like, what are my actual goals? What is it that I want to do? What is it that makes me happy?
Hmm.
What is it that am I capitulating to what society is saying I should do and should make me happy?
Hmm.
Or am I actually happy? I have this job that everyone thinks I should be happy about, but I'm not happy. Why is
Hmm.
that?
Yeah.
Society has so much of an imprint on our minds in terms of how we evaluate what success is and what happiness is, and goals. I remember someone talking about, they said if they put that they got a new job, they get 350 likes, and if they put that they started a new business, they get 11 likes.
Right.
It's
Right.
just the way society views things, and so it's hard to not fall into those those traps,
Hmm.
landmines of like, okay, this is what I need to do to.
Hmm.
And then it gets lonely at times when you're going to you mentioned the road less traveled. That road gets lonely sometimes, and so some people are not willing to be lonely for any period of time.
Yeah.
So it's also another thing. I had a friend that, something funny that you mentioned that road less traveled. I had a friend that literally came up to me that I hadn't seen in a while. Um, and I wouldn't even call him a friend, just an associate. And he literally recited the road less traveled to me, to
Hmm.
tell me. He said, listen, when I see you, this is what I think of. Can I recite a poem? This is a very powerful moment. It was very unorthodox, out of the blue.
Hmm.
Can I recite this poem for you? I was like, yeah. He's like, it's called The Road Less Traveled. I was like, I know it. He
Hmm.
recited it for me. He said, listen, what you're doing is, there's going to be a lot. It's going to be hard for a lot of people to advise you, because a lot of people have not been down this road.
Put the neck out
And yeah. And he said, a lot of times you're going to
there.
feel like you're lonely. He said, but a lot of times that loneliness is when God is pruning you,
Hmm.
shaping you to go out there and execute the things that you're executing. So
Hmm.
anytime you feel that, just understand that that's a period of time when you're being strengthened, right, to go execute. And he said, go on, my brother, keep doing your thing. It's and
Hmm.
proud of you, all that type of stuff. But it was a very powerful moment for me, and it made me, and it was something that I'll never forget, because that's part of this thing too. Is that you have to also. It's not just the uncomfort of not knowing what's next, but it's also that loneliness that comes with it. The feeling that when people think you're crazy, or people think, "Wow, man, what the hell is he doing?" or whatever, like those type of things are real. And so
Hmm.
being able to deal with that emotionally and mental health,
Yes.
the big part of that as well. So it's a lot.
So you transition from law and now is music, one of the original loves,
Mhm.
something, back to the band.
Right.
How did you always had a relationship with music, but how did you get to where you are today with licensing deals? You are now back heavy into the Ohio State program. You're doing from I think that was a pregame performance, for the fans, for the 500,000 that were tailgating and things like that. How did you get from walking away from that law firm to where you are in music right now?
That's a good question, man. So I think this, first of all, it's been the number one word I would say is perseverance. Number
Mhm.
two word I would say is consistency. And then the third word I would use is belief, right? And I think that early on I realized, like, my road in this music industry is not going to be the same as some other people's, right? And for a couple of reasons. One, I was kind of unorthodox. My background is different than a lot of people in hip hop, and I wasn't necessarily going to be accepted right away as like there are people that question my authenticity and stuff just because of my background and the fact that I'm a
Mhm.
lawyer and all that type of stuff. Like I knew that I understood all that. That wasn't lost on me either. Also, I wasn't necessarily so gung ho about getting a record deal. A lot of times I'm in meetings with labels. I'm like, I know more than the person talking to me
Yeah.
about this. You know what I mean? Like, you
Mhm.
can't tell me that, bro. Like, you know what I mean? And so I realized that for me to ever get a deal that I thought was favorable, I would have to have a crazy amount of leverage that I didn't have. You know what I mean? So I was always like, all right, I'm just going to do this independently.
Yeah.
And so, but that being said, you realize that this game is entertainment at the end of the day, and a lot of times people are going to they need to see some objective things sometimes before they can support you, even
Mhm.
your own friends and family. So I knew I was going to have to make some type of wave somewhere, right? It's not just about the song that I put out. It's like, where was it featured? What was the collaboration? How much do you get paid? There's got to be something else that will make people kind of pay attention. And so I think the first thing that happened was, like I said, I threw parties in New York, so I was really well connected
Mhm.
out there, and but they didn't necessarily know me for music, but I used those connections to kind of try to figure out different angles and learn different things, and so I ended up learning about music licensing, and that was actually part of some of the legal work I was doing when I was at the law firm, which
Wow.
was on purpose. So I ended up getting in contact with somebody at ESPN. I knew somebody named Mike Hill. Shout out to Mike Hill, it's my guy. He's at Fox Sports now. Might know him. He was working at ESPN at the time, and he used to come to some of my parties. And so
Mhm.
I sent him a message and said, "Hey, do you know who the music licensing person is at ESPN?"
Mhm.
And he ended up connecting me via email to the guy. And so I sent him some music, and he was like, Mike was like, "Look, I'll take it from here. You know what I mean? I don't know him like that. I
Yeah.
don't make those type of decisions, but I can at least connect you through email." And that connection was powerful enough. So I ended up sending him some music, and he loved it. And we
Mhm.
ended up doing like a 4-song licensing deal for college football for that season.
Wow.
And as part of the negotiation, obviously there was a payment and stuff like that, but it wasn't a ton, but it was, some money.
Mhm.
But it was to make sure that my name was on the screen every time the
Right.
song was.
Which is the big part.
That's a big part. That's
Yeah.
so that situation really, I think, was the first kind of objective
Mhm.
situation that let people know, like, okay, this dude he has to have some talent in music,
Yeah.
right? Because he's on ESPN. I turn on ESPN watching the game, and I see Mekka Don on the screen.
Right.
So
Right.
that to me, and for me, the type of person I am, is
Mhm.
like, you let that door open a little bit, I'm in there. I'm
Yeah.
guaranteed I'm gonna find my way in. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So that was, to me, I think, what kicked off a long journey of leveraging, continuing to make good music, finding opportunities, thinking outside the box. 2012 or 2013, I ended up winning an MTV award for being
Mhm.
all the best freshmen. It was like the news, like me. They put me up against 4 other artists. They were all on major labels, except
Mhm.
me. We ended up winning that one, 86% of the vote. My fans showed up. And that turned me up. And now I'm on, back when they used to play videos, but now I'm on MTV rotation, VH1, my videos everywhere. So those things. Then now you're just building on those things, right?
Mhm.
And it's just like, and if you look back at the arc of anybody's career in entertainment, it's really just that. It's just like you make moves, you build on it. You make another moves, you build on it, right? It's not like, and people can say you fell off. If they don't hear from you for a year or two, you could be Lil Wayne and they say, he hasn't put an album out 2 years, he fell off. It's like, it's a crazy
Yeah.
thing. So you
Yeah.
got to kind of just keep going and keep making things happen and doing it at your pace that you're comfortable with. And that's what I've done now, all the way up to, my deal with Ohio State, having the official anthem "Buckle Up" and that being the song they run out to every game,
Mhm.
and I performed it on Fox Big Noon Kickoff. I mean,
Mhm.
literally, they had the 3 artists before me were DJ Khaled and Fat Joe, Offset, and Moneybagg Yo, and then Mecca Don.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? So like, to get turned up all the way like that
Yeah.
for me was a long time coming, man. I think there are a lot of people who a lot of people who know me know my story, but there's some people that just think, they see you on TV like, yo, where'd this dude come from? I'm like, oh,
Right.
bro, if you even knew the work, the trials and tribulations, the ups and downs, the amount of no's I had to overcome to get to this situation, you wouldn't believe it. But that's really what it takes, man, to be successful in anything. I think is again perseverance, consistency, and belief.
Yeah, so this last part that you were saying, the amount of no's, because in your throughout your career, I think what most people don't understand is like they get a lot more no's than they do
Yes,
yeses. Could you
yes.
tell people your perspective of the amount of no's that you got in every endeavor that you've ever had versus the few yeses, but the heavily weighted yeses?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think it's so important for me too, because I think sometimes because of the way I communicate and the way people see things happen for me in the public eye, they
Mhm.
assume that things are just going so easy for me and I'm just always able to just make things happen, bro. No, no. The amount of no's that I've gotten, I mean, and still get, right,
Mhm.
are tenfold the
Yeah.
amount, hundredfold the amount of yeses that I get. I mean, in the music industry specifically, I mean, multiple people that you're not good enough. Why
Mhm.
are you doing this? Go back to law, work on this, work on that. Some of those things are helpful critiques that help me over time, right? Like, so there are periods of time where I wasn't good enough. It was real talk.
Mhm.
But then you also realize that some people just they don't like your taste, they don't like your style, they don't like that's not what they like. Just like fans, there's some fans that just don't like Kendrick, they like Drake, or they don't like Drake, they just like they don't like that style. But that's not necessarily an indictment on your talent.
Mhm.
So those are things that you have to also overcome. It's just like it's not just the no's, but also what do those no's do to your soul? What do they do to your confidence? What do they do to your desire to keep pushing, right?
Mhm.
So in the music industry, you can only imagine like coming in the game with no, I didn't have a crew. I didn't have G Unit behind me. I didn't have, you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
I'm coming in solo dolo with no record label.
Mhm.
No's all throughout, and there's still a ton of no's.
Mhm.
But those yeses can be so powerful. You know what I mean? Like that one yes on, to have me headline Fox Big Noon Kickoff, bro. Like
Mhm.
that's a game changer for my career. Even if you don't like my music, you have to respect it now,
Yeah.
right? That one yes has changed my life forever. I'm not the same. The second I got off that stage, I'm no longer the same artist that I was before that day. That's just the facts. You know what I mean? So that's the power of the yes and why, and getting those moments along the way. It's important though. That's the other thing too, is getting those wins along the way. It's important, first of all, to celebrate those, but also those are the things that also help keep you going. You know,
Mhm.
those are the things that help make you say, okay, this is possible. All right, this can happen for me. For
Mhm.
example, I'm a commercial actor. I do a lot of commercials. I just did one with Aaron Judge and Champ Sports that
Mhm.
for holiday season. But I auditioned, I could audition 100 times before I get one commercial, or
Mhm.
even all back, you
Mhm.
know. But all people see is they see the final product. They see you on TV, like, oh wow, Mac is doing his thing. Yeah, I'm doing my thing, but there's a lot of no's and a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes to make it happen. And
Mhm.
so I also try to be transparent about that because I think that's an important part when you're talking, especially when you're talking to young people
Mhm.
understand that part of it. That's the part that you're going to also have to navigate. Again, not just the no's. What does that do to your confidence? How do you stay
Mhm.
confident through those no's? So that's been a very, very big part of my career and anybody else's career.
Mhm.
You look at, and some of the things that help me sometimes when I, feeling bad about myself, just go online and just put in, go to Twitter and go to the search bar and put in like, I don't know, LeBron sucks or whatever.
Yeah.
And you're gonna see mad people say,
Right,
you know
right.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you're like LeBron, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like Kendrick or Drake or Nas or Jay-Z, whoever the
Anyone.
GOAT is. And you're gonna see people even at that level,
Mhm.
lots of people who so like that's not this is what everyone goes through and it never stops,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I'll speak on that real the nose. Like I mentioned Lil Wayne a couple times in this, and part of the reason why I keep bringing him up is because he's fresh in my head from what's happened with the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He's a huge artist that's done so much for the culture.
Mhm.
Beyond this, he's also a pop culture person. He's not just people know him,
Mhm.
in culture. He's on sports channels and all kinds of other stuff. And he didn't get the Super Bowl in his city.
Mhm.
Kendrick got it. And so, and I'm not saying he should have or shouldn't have. That's not the reason why I'm bringing it up. But my point is that you still have to keep fighting. Like the fight never stops. You have to keep selling. You have to keep going. Even once you get the yeses and even once you come to the ultimate level of accomplishment, you still have to keep going, and that's part of what I think, last thing I'll say, one of my mentors had told me a long time ago, he said, this game is like the war of attrition, whoever can withstand the BS the longest, gonna go through BS and it's gonna be crazy, but whoever can withstand it the longest and stay standing, a lot of times wins. And I think for me, that's a lot of the reason why I've been able to win is because I've really been able to withstand a lot of BS.
Absolutely. Just like Nipsey Hussle said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
At 100%.
Yeah, yeah. So just wrapping up, just with the final question, just throughout your whole career, your career started well beyond you were a walk-on. And it started the day you were born and your interest and how like the things that you've navigated yourself through. But, for the sake of, what we're doing, you were a walk-on for Ohio State, and that was a pivotal moment for you in your development and the experiences that you've had and the relationships that you've developed. Like what would you say for, just the walk-on who may be afraid of taking risk, maybe afraid of putting their neck out there? What is your message to people who are currently walk-ons and will be walk-ons?
I think a couple of things. So first of all, I think being a walk-on, you have to understand that you are in an elite group of people in your sport or in your career. You're elite. Just because you're not a scholarship player doesn't mean you're elite. You are living that opportunity right there is the dream that millions of kids across the country would die to have and they'll never get. So that's number one. Don't fall into the trap of, oh, I'm not really that good, or I'm not, I'm a walk-on. I'm just a walk-on. No. You are elite, right? And a lot of times, sometimes the difference between a walk-on and a scholarship player is it could be what school you went to. It could be how late, how much coverage your school got. It could be, the scholarship limits. It could be a lot of different things. It's not an indictment on your talent. So that's number one. Number two, recognize the opportunity, and this is the opportunity related to that sport, which is you have an opportunity to go compete. And there are a lot of walk-ons who have gone and got on scholarship or went and played or wouldn't even play professionally or whatever. But there's also an opportunity to build a network, and that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to build. And it's important to understand that while you're playing, because there's certain relationships that are important to build while you're playing. It goes back to what I was saying before about being a current player versus being a former player.
Right.
If you're a current player, there are a lot of opportunities. You can walk into probably any building in that city and say, hey, I'm such and such. I play for such and such, I want to internship, whatever. Literally, you can use that as a sword, and you should use it to your advantage. And those relationships are relationships that can last you a lifetime. I mean, mine's fast forward 2 decades later, and now I'm back with the same university, with the biggest moment in my career is literally in a business deal with the same university that I was a walk-on for 2 decades ago.
Right.
So understanding that power, and understanding the power also of these universities, right? And being connected to these universities. They are heavy, big, well-branded institutions that have a far international reach. And so understanding that there's value in that as well. And then lastly is remember what you came there to do, and that's, put in the work, just like you've been putting in the work. That's why you're there. And, your opportunity may or may not come in terms of the way you want it to come. You ultimately get to control kind of what your attitude is about it. And there are a lot of great things that can come out of those experiences, whether you end up being a great player or not. There are a lot of great things that can come out of those experiences. And so not taking that for granted, and then also making sure that you're just really enjoying the moment, because these are moments that you're never going to get back, and you'll never forget for as long as you live.
Buckle up, we going for a ride. Knuckle up, it's time for a fight. Buckle up, buckle up.